Man-Made, a science fiction thriller, Episode 9, The Event Network. More will soon be said of the efforts of governments to keep order, charitable organizations to provide relief, and the world's religious leaders to offer comfort. First, however, it is imperative to understand what was being learned about the way the event was functioning. The line of destruction had, for now, moved beyond heavily populated areas, and in every major remaining capital, noted scientists and thinkers gathered and teleconferenced with their counterparts under the auspices of the United Nations to collect all known attributes of the event process in hopes of better understanding its reach, limitations, if any, and to propose actions that might be taken to mitigate its effect. To this end, the hastily and poorly named Event Network was established in Paris, the closest intact metropolitan infrastructure on the safe side of the Prime Meridian. Its first request of its members was for any potential hypotheses as to the cause of the disruption, in the hope that, as unlikely as it was, if the reasons behind the event could be uncovered, a quick response might be proposed and put into action. A wide range of suggestions were offered, but quickly pared down to just two that did not border on wild speculation nor faith: a gamma-ray burst from a distant supernova or a tear in space-time. Though almost irrational under normal circumstances, in light of the reality of the situation, these two primary considerations seemed eminently possible compared to all the rest. Still, they needed to fit the facts, which, it was fast determined, they did not. First, a gamma-ray burst would be instantly fatal to any form of life. And clearly, no life was directly harmed by the event, the only harm coming from collateral damage caused by the vanishing of physical items. As for a tear in space-time, no one could imagine how such a thing might manifest itself. But if it was the cause, then the leading edge should describe a circle on the globe as the Earth moved through it, referring to information coming out from most every country, as well as to direct observations of the network members. There had been no reports of incidents on the other side of the planet. Two last-minute suggestions were offered, the first being from a scientist at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, that perhaps the event was our interface with an alternate universe as the membranes between the two realities merged. While theoretically possible, it was quickly pointed out by a network member in Beijing that if humanity was being transported to another world, it would be one which was uninhabited, and yet still showed signs of habitation in the roadbeds without pavement, the basements without buildings, and the stone bridges that still existed in the affected zone. The final hypothesis was proposed from Hollywood by a celebrity scientist and host of educational reality programs, suggesting that we may, in fact, be living in a virtual world that was now being reprogrammed. Following this suggestion, the network chair commented to the effect that even if any of these leading hypotheses were correct, then the nature of the event would be so far beyond our technical understanding that we would have no capability to respond in any meaningful way. Abandoning that line of inquiry for something more immediately practical, the highest priority was to determine the speed at which the leading edge was progressing, so as to provide an actionable timetable. Based on analysis of several videos uploaded from London and timing the line of demolition against landmarks of known distance as they vanished, it was agreed that in England the interface line was moving westward at nearly 1,000 kilometers per hour. This was corroborated by information received from NATO planes still pacing the leading edge, and by those few commercial pilots able to remain ahead of it, indicating the speed was remaining constant. But contradictory to this calculation were data from the webcam operators at Amundsen Scott Station, who had just recently made it to the sign for the geographic South Pole and reported their findings. The average temperature that winter was rivaling the previous record of 61 degrees Celsius, so preparing for even such a short journey required attention to detail and therefore took time. Once confident in their arrangements, they pressed on into the Antarctic night, quickly arriving at their destination. There, they documented first-person observations that the edge of the sign was in fact disappearing very slowly and in a perfect perpendicular manner. When one of the engineers, leaning forward with a swab to collect a sample, reached slightly beyond the sign, the swab and the fingers of his glove vanished as well, leaving his hand fully exposed to the intense cold. At that temperature, he had less than 1 minute to avoid severe frostbite and possible amputation. Fortunately, some of the smaller pieces of equipment they had brought with them were protected by battery-powered self-heating bags, and it was an easy decision to sacrifice one of those instruments to Antarctica rather than the engineer's fingers. Continuing their research, they employed GPS to determine the current location of the pole relative to the sign, taking into account the ice cap drift. Being careful to avoid the line of disintegration, they placed a metal sheet over the precise position of the pole and, within just a few minutes, discovered that the line was describing an expanding pie slice, moving at a rate of approximately 3 inches, or 8 centimeters, per hour when measured at a distance of 1 foot, 0.3 meters, from the pole. If the speed of the event was 1,000 kilometers per hour across Europe and just 8 centimeters per hour at the pole, it suggested the line was not a flat plane in space that the Earth was passing through, but a plane that followed longitude lines, currently on only one side of the globe. As inescapable as that conclusion appeared to be, it absolutely suggested intelligent design and also a degree of precision unthinkable with our current understanding of physics. Therefore, before accepting the apparent result, the event network called on data provided by NASA that might firmly settle the matter. The ISS had orbited at just over 400 kilometers above the surface of the Earth. Earth observation satellites, such as Earth imaging devices and those operated by the military, circled the Earth every 99 minutes at roughly twice that height, most often in a polar orbit so that the entire surface of the Earth came under its path eventually. GPS satellites operated at slightly more than 20,000 kilometers with an orbital period of 12 hours, whereas geosynchronous satellites remained anchored over a fixed point on Earth. Their orbit matches the rotation of the Earth and were positioned marginally above the GPS orbital sphere. Of the 12,000 satellites ever launched, between 6,000 and 7,000 were still in orbit at the time of the event and tracked by NASA. Of these, approximately 40% were currently active. Knowing the orbits of each, NASA was able to quickly confirm that within the first hour after the event, the signals from nearly 4% of all active satellites at every altitude had failed along a line that followed longitude. In addition, the data suggested no upward limit to the effect of the event had yet been detected, suggesting it was not something we could fly over, or that any spaceborne infrastructure would remain if the phenomenon continued its present course. The Event Network Conference agreed without dissent that there was no doubt. The event interface was circling the globe along the lines of longitude at a speed equal to the rotation of the Earth at any given point. This information was quickly sent on to governments of all nations, so they might know how much time they had before the interface reached their borders, and how long it would take to cross them. The final projection was, therefore, that the phenomenon would ultimately circle the entire globe and return to Greenwich exactly 24 hours after it had begun, as the Earth rotated beneath it. End.